And welcome to Something to Talk About. Here we are at King's Restaurant, and we're talking about the 9th Micronesian Nonprofit Congress, which is right now together with a number of islands from the South Pacific nations and all throughout Micronesia. NGOs from across the ocean have come to gather here. Part of the Pudzuta, and we've got Eddie Regis, who is a member of the board of directors, but you also come from another nonprofit, which is...
I'm the vice chair, but I'm also the president of the Flame Tree Freedom Center, which is a nonprofit organization that employs individuals with disabilities.
And our guest today, in addition to Eddie, but you live here, so
Yeah, okay.
all the way from the Cook Islands, Ku Mataroa is here with us. He is the vice chair of Piango, which is the Pacific Islands Association of NGOs, of which, by the way, Pudzuta has just now joined, right? And so what's remarkable is that you are, you know, apart from the Cook Islands, you've held one of your meetings, one of your first meetings for...
One of the first.
Here on Guam.
Yeah, in Guam.
This is interesting because when you talk about nonprofits, it spans so much. Oh, how is it? And maybe Kia, you could tell me what have you learned about the similarities in the islands, in the South Pacific Islands and in Micronesia that we share?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of your interview today. As alluded to, I am Ku Mataro from the Cook Islands. We have our own umbrella organization, and Piango is a regional organization for NGOs, and in fact the premier NGO regional organization, which has 24 constituencies. That means 24 national liaison umbrellas who has their own numbers of NGOs associated with the NLU. And for us coming to Guam for the first time, the board of Piango meeting in Guam is a first. And we're so privileged to be here in Guam. And it only also entertains the fact that the chair of Piango is Sarah Nederdog, your very own NGO rep here, who is with Pudzuta and working also as a Deputy Chief Operations Officer with WestCare Pacific. And we share a lot of common attributes or common issues around the Pacific, but our main focus are talking and voicing issues that others cannot say or voice in here. So we are the voices for the voiceless.
Sure.
And we are a regional organization, a network of, as alluded to, 24 NLUs who has thousands of members. And we've become a conduit for many of the organizations around the Pacific. And we are a member of the Pacific Island Development Forum, similar to the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat that was established by governments back in 1982. But for Piango, we share common voices around the Pacific in light of the rights of indigenous people of the world. But in this case, the rights of indigenous people of the Pacific. And I, for one, is a passionate driver in this area for human rights associated with indigenous people and their rights to land, their resources.
And rights to the
and,
in the ocean. Are
and
there
to
not
the ocean.
also ancestral rights to the ocean?
Absolutely, and that is more so paramount that, as a classic case, we've gone ahead for the Cook Islands to look at opportunities for us to be able to work with government. And even if that has to evolve around court proceedings. This is a showcase to government that there are people that matters most in each of our island nations, and they are to be consulted. And your traditional leaders like myself and my team, we have had the opportunity to face such determination to ensure that the government realize or recognize the importance of traditional leaders of the
Being
Cook Islands
included at the table,
included
right?
at
Yeah.
the table, and it become that's just we're also part of a regional Pacific view on climate change or climate crisis, and we're all associated. I mean, just before we left the meeting, there was a presentation by the senator on.
Sabina Paris.
Okay.
So she had a very good video footage of what it should be all about. It's people linked to the land, and the land also looking after its people. If we do damages to the land itself, it will do likewise to us as people.
This is Eddie. You and I know you appreciate that this is a long battle for islanders, for indigenous peoples to constantly try to protect our resources, our environmental resources, in the face of another global effort, to try to get into these areas, especially in the South Pacific, so many untapped areas for example, drilling for geothermal energy.
Yes.
And the clashes that you have with an ownership, a personal ownership or ancestral ownership
like
of
that, yes.
right of the ocean,
absolutely.
and trying to respect that the ocean is also part of the land, and it is a resource that should be also respected. So sitting at the table sometimes becomes a challenge, because I think that maybe some of these big corporations or some of the larger governments don't necessarily want to hear from us,
No.
because this is these are profitable ventures for them.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is I really have to applaud Piango, because just very recently in this end of 2018, Piango has established a formal consultation voice in the United Nations. And now that Pazuta is part of Piango, we can channel our
Interests through them.
Civil society organizations can channel our positions through them, and collectively, as of all the island nations that we have in the Pacific, Piango is going to be our voice in the UN.
And and that's actually very significant, because we are still a U.S. territory
Right.
with some sort of credibility to the table because of our interests, or at least the interest that the United States has in our resources on Guam. I was having a conversation with the Micronesian Conservation Coalition yesterday, the founder, and we were talking about the attitudes about climate change. And not to get too political, but under the Obama administration, the United States, was very active and had a lead role in how we viewed and addressed climate change. And under the current administration, it's a little less of an interest in it, and a scientific interest even in it. And so I'm wondering whether or not, because the United States is not in the forefront of climate change like we had been in a past administration, whether we're getting more people who are understanding it and want to be a part of it, because the threat is very real. At least in the islands, we know.
Yes.
And I make the point about climate change migration on Guam, with these islands in Micronesia that become inundated, where people have nowhere else to go but the higher ground, right, to protect themselves and survivability.
Well, again, I think Piango has been very instrumental in. There's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are recognized by the United Nations, and 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals were a result of the collective efforts of the Pacific Islands, because we understand the impact on climate change, what it does to our fishing industries and so forth. And what was the other development goal that was created as a result of
The partnerships in
partnership,
17.
which is establishing a partnership between civil society organizations, the government, as well as with the private sector.
And I know that the current administration takes this conversation very seriously. We're going to have to take a really quick break here, but when we come back, I really want to focus in on the Cook Islands. You have a larger mass of control over in this area in the South Pacific, over Fiji and the other island nations. So I wanted to find out specifically what the Cook Islands are like, and what are the sort of challenges that you face there. We're glad to have you.
Yeah,
Eat some
thank you.
Kelaguen. He tried some dried beef, and we've got food here. So we'll be right back. We're talking about the 9th Micronesian Nonprofit Congress taking place, and our guest from Cook Islands. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Something to Talk About here at King's Restaurant in Tamuning. An interesting conversation about nonprofit organizations, interesting conversation about some of the challenges that we all share being islands, indigenous peoples trying to find their identity and their links with our own different governments. You're linked to New Zealand.
Yes.
We, of course, with the U.S. federal government. There is a big conference, they call it a Congress that's taking place right now. And I'm sure by the time this airs, it'll be over. But nonetheless, we know that you're just coming from the conference today. Eddie Regis is with us, and as well as Keu Mataroa. It's nice to have you from the Cook Islands. I made a mention about the commitment by the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. And how important that's going to be as we find the direction by linking up with these larger countries to be able to have a say?
Yes, that's been one of our goals, is to try and see how we can work with the government to help provide quality services to the people of Guam. And I must say that we were very delighted to receive an invitation from the governor and the lieutenant governor to have us have a desk at the state clearinghouse so that we can address those gaps in services that the government currently isn't providing, to see how we can also get funding and support the government. So we're very excited about that invitation. One thing I want to say about the board of directors from the Piango is what we learned during this conference was they have over 100 members in some of the nations that are members of their umbrella organization. Right now, Guam only has about 20. Now, we need to do a better job at figuring out how we can incorporate that, and we want to look to our brothers and sisters in the other islands, because I think they really focus on the tradition, and I think they're very well connected, and we have a lot to learn because they have over 100 member organizations, and that's an army of
there are
support.
different identities, right?
Yes.
There are
Yes.
different identities. I wanted to actually bring up that part about your identities. I know that you are right now embroiled in something that will define you just by name.
Yes.
It's interesting because I've just come from Hawaii, and it's the same conversation they're having about Captain Cook and the Big Island of Hawaii. Cook Islands obviously got its name from there.
Yes.
It's a number of islands. How many
destination.
numbers? Like 15 islands
15
altogether. And the largest one is Rarotonga. Okay. And so talk to me about just the idea that you want to get away from being identified with Captain Cook.
Apart from all the traditions, and of course, I'll start off by looking at it from a historical point of view in terms of how we became who we are. And we talk about our traditional leaders' titles today. And now working together was also defined earlier on as part of our existence in the Cook Islands. I always start first by saying that traditional leaders with their titles are immemorial. So everything is traditional, the land, the ocean, and they are immemorial. And then the gospel arrived in the Cook Islands on the 26th of October, 1821. That also defined a new status for the Cook Islands when the missionaries came into the Cook Islands and established missions around our islands. And then thirdly, we have, I call the Benjamin of society, and that is the youngest of the three, which is government, which was born in 1965. Now, with regards to the name change, and I mean it's gone viral. We've had calls from all major newspapers around the world, even New York, and there's been a lot of offer by other groups to see how we can make those changes. And I'm part of this committee of, we're calling it the naming, Cook Islands Naming Committee Advisory Group of traditional leaders of academia. And we have also esteemed colleagues around who is very fond of the way we live. And that has brought out a very unique setting for the Cook Islands. We're not focusing on how Captain Cook became an issue for this name change, but rather to look at the opportunity for our nation to become realized through a traditional name.
I see.
Being called other than the Cook Islands.
It's an identity.
It is.
Because if the people have something to identify with, then life becomes a little more clear.
Yeah. And of course, like New Zealand, there's now a petition out in New Zealand to officially recognize New Zealand as Aotearoa. This is their other Maori name.
Okay.
And although they've been used, but this is now a very productive process of getting it fully fledged and recognized at the government level, the state level.
Do you have to have a plebiscite in the Cook Islands
We,
to decide on a name? And
yes.
have you narrowed it down?
We've received so far 64 names around the islands, and some have contributed from overseas, our Cook Islanders living in Australia and New Zealand. But there are also those who are opposed to, for obvious reasons. We've had the name and around for since inception, and it has been recognized around the world as the Cook Islands.
Right.
To make that, it's going to be big. It's not going to be an easy task, but we've got 64 names, and now it's our job of the committee that's been, it's going to be established by Cabinet to have a look at a new name. But you refer to one question, there's two issues here, whether to go through a referendum or how you do it here also, and engage the interests of our people in the Cook Islands. Now we've had some issues on Cook Islanders living in the Cook Islands, saying to our Cook Islanders living overseas, look, you don't live here.
Yeah, exactly.
But they have a right to
Sure.
to
we go through the same thing.
Yes.
We have our clashes with people who.
The only but the only distinction is when we have our general elections, our Cook Islanders overseas are not eligible to vote.
Right. Okay.
But the name change is it's a big task. We have also looked at processes that would entail how this is going to impact for us. The pros and cons.
Do you have a majority of people who are for just the answer, the yes or no to the name change?
We're going through a survey to that effect.
Yeah.
One international company have offered to do the survey for us, exactly doing that, whether yes or no.
Right.
But we see it on Facebook. There's been some challenges. There's a lot of people posting in terms of saying that look, we're renowned in the world as Cook Islands, and whatever Captain Cook did is not to be the catalyst for the years for change.
Yeah.
So the committee has a task ahead.
Yeah.
To,
we look forward to seeing how this is all going to work out.
Yes.
Now, just about the culture and the lifestyle. I'm sure that you have all of the same modern trappings. I wanted before we close, I wanted to ask you about the influence of Western culture, of U.S. culture, for example, through entertainment and other social issues, and how it influences the youth in the Cook Islands.
yes.
How much are they impacted by the lifestyle of America?
Well, for the Cook Islands, we're very fortunate that we have a strong traditional and cultural realm that our young people, because our dances, our culture is taught at school also as part of the curriculum. And as they grow, they are part of they're taught how to dance.
The traditions are strong.
Very strong.
And so, that's the law. That's the first law.
First thing
That's a big
Yeah.
difference when when you are governed in your family by the traditional government. It makes it a lot easier to find your way.
And we have
navigate your
a
way.
strong partnership in terms of traditional leaders. As you know, in terms of the Council of Chiefs, and
That's the
everybody,
key, yeah.
everybody, each king, queen, and traditional leaders like myself has to entertain that. But
Yeah.
for me, I also have. I'm part of a dance team that resonates a lot of our cultural practices.
Yeah.
And
There are a lot of similarities. I think that Guam is, sometimes we fall a little bit behind on some of these things
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, but it was a pleasure meeting you. I'm grateful that we had an
you should
opportunity.
make you should
I
make a
should
trip
make
to the
my
Cook
way.
Islands.
I'm
Every
in,
July,
yeah.
every July in the Cook Islands is our, we call it our Constitution celebrations, where all of our islands come together every year.
Thank you so much, Kayla. It's very nice to have met you. Thank you for
Thank
helping
you.
us
Thank you,
along.
Patty.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Something to Talk About.